yeah. Yuki Nakamura, ladies and gentlemen, from Japan, live from Japan. That song, he sang that, he composed that while he was in Japan recently. Still there, hasn't been able to record, so that's why I'm sitting here talking to myself. But Yuki sent that little ditty in, and I think it was beautiful. It's called I Miss You, John, and I wish I was here to speak to you about things called the buffet. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. See, that's why I need somebody to bounce off of, because I'm sitting here, I'm just jibber-jabbering into this microphone. Okay, let's do this. This is so exciting today because we have a guest, another guest. Last week was Ryan Polin, yeah. Another Yuki original. Thank you, Yuki. This week we have another great filmmaker, and his name is Frank Farel. Frank Farel of Spookies fame. I mean, holy Lord in heaven, this is going to be... I mean, I have a slight connection to Spookies because of the Spookies rap that we did on the Joe Bob show. And now I'm speaking to him about all sorts of stuff. We got into all sorts of movies, and it's amazing. His time working at a theater back when he used to program in the 70s. So we're going to get to that in a moment, but again, as just like last week, I dug into the archives because it wouldn't be correct to not have Yuki on this episode. So what I found is actually kind of amazing. I forgot all about this, and we never shared this either on the Patreon or on the Patreon podcast buffet. So this is the first phone call that Yuki and I ever had where I described to him what I wanted to do with Patreon and podcasts and shows with Yuki, and this is him learning in real time about the idea for the Patreon buffet, which now is also the podcast buffet. So enjoy that phone call because Yuki is discovering what this all could be all about, all right? And then don't worry, Yuki's coming back. Tomorrow we actually have a scheduled meeting where we're going to meet, we're going to do a Zoom, we're going to do a bunch of episodes, and then the week after that, Yuki's coming to hang out with me in person, and we're going to do even more episodes. So Yuki's coming back, ladies and gentlemen, but until then, listen to this clip, the very first phone call that we ever had discussing the buffet, and then we'll get into the interview, and then we'll come back at the end and wrap it all up. All right, guys, thanks for joining us today. I'm John Brennan.
So Patreon is like our page in the internet. Exactly. And what value we give them is ourselves, our content, our discussions. I mean, right now, this would be a great discussion to have.
Oh. But like, you're a musician, you sing, but I don't have anything except just being Yuki. I mean,
that's the whole point. People love you. So what we do is we lean into that. Basically, there's so many ideas. Like for one idea I have is that I would cook for you from an Elvis book, all of Elvis's favorite recipes. And I would cook you the fried peanut butter and banana sandwich, and you would taste it and see how you like it. That's a show.
I see. So I like the food reviewing the recipes, the food book.
Exactly. And you can say it sucks. You can say it's good. You can say it's bad. And we can do, yeah. And people might be interested in watching that.
Oh, so using my character from the Joe Bob, the last drive-in, using them become the criticizing the Elvis food book.
Exactly. And that's just one idea. There's other ideas where, like on the internet, a lot of people make content where they just watch other things and give opinions. So for instance, if a new Star Wars movie is coming out, we would sit you down in front of a camera and watch you watch the Star Wars trailer. And then you could say if it looks good, bad, horrible. And people like that.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, and it's not going to be that hard to do because I already have all the cameras. I already have all the microphones.
Oh, I see. I think you and I can talk about the movie and the food forever.
Forever.
Why? I mean, we have food, we have movie, and the probably.
And so that leads me to the title of the whole thing. It'll be called Patreon Buffet.
So buffet could be any buffet, right? I mean, content it could be food, could be movie, could be music, could be anything.
You got it. The buffet is anything. It could be a buffet podcast. It could be a buffet movie. Everything we do is the buffet. It's a different taste.
Yeah. Buffet sounds good. We love buffet anyway, so that's good.
Yuki and John's Patreon Buffet. You don't have to turn on your video, but if you want to, you're more than welcome. But if not, I get it.
Well, I tend to actually like having a person to talk to. I only get distracted when my image is up there at the same time. Then I keep looking at myself.
All right. So what I'll do is for the video portion, I'll just put up a picture of you, and I'll keep rotating pictures of you that I find on your Facebook page.
Thank you.
Dissolving in and out of your many beautiful pictures. All right, so let's begin, okay? Because this is so exciting for me, and I just want to get going because you are Frank. Now, I ask the person's name because I don't know exactly how to pronounce it because sometimes I get things wrong. So how do you say your name?
Frank? It is Farel. It's not Farrell. Farrell usually has either two R's or two L's, or pardon me, sometimes two L's, but it has multiple different spellings. And Farel is actually a derivative of Farella, but my father in the 50s decided that being Italian was not that cool. The way it became, like a decade later, it became very cool.
Yeah, it did actually. It became the coolest thing on earth for a minute. But so okay, yeah. I would have pronounced your name wrong. So thankfully, you cleared that up for me. And so you are the man behind the Spookies, right?
I am one of the men, yes.
That's right. So but this is so exciting because recently you had an announcement that Spookies 2 is on the horizon.
It's on the horizon. I can almost see it, but I'm also very practical, and we've just started to look into the financing aspect, got everything together, have a screenplay we're pretty satisfied with, have a pitch deck, have an illustrated lookbook with full of AI art, which I was very skeptical about using, but it turned out great. It gets a tremendous response. So
some people really have anti-AI art stuff going on, but as personally,
I can understand.
Yeah,
if I were, say, a graphic artist or I did certain other things, I would be kind of nervous about the whole thing. But my attitude ultimately is I'm a filmmaker, and as a filmmaker, you utilize all sorts of artists. You need, as you need a composer, you need camera people, you need actors. To have a resource where you can just go and say, all right, I can instantly have something that I can at least have to work with, or maybe sort of bring the ideas together, or whatever it is. I just think it's a great tool for creative people, and for non-creative people, it's a great illusion that they're creative. Because that's how it.
Yeah.
That's how it works. I mean, it's because people who aren't creative can just like say something and get a great image. It's almost impossible to get a bad image or anything with AI. There's also now AI music that I don't know if you've heard some of it.
Yes, there is actually a song, and it goes like this. I wanna poopity scoop in your shoopity.
Yes, I've heard it.
It's a good song. I'm sorry.
And it's so funny because what has happened is with that like now with the AI artwork, right? They pretty much prevented it from becoming pornographic. I mean, there are now specific sites that you can do things pornographically,
right?
But the original, I mean, and most of the bigger AI sites will not allow you to do certain explicit things. And I mean, it's almost with the music. There's no real such limitations because whatever language you want to use. So people are primarily doing, and they're doing it for the same reason that, like when home video happened, pornography was right at the forefront. That was the first thing everyone was buying. It was the first stuff available was mostly pornography.
Sure.
And that, ultimately sex is the lowest common denominator interest. And so therefore, but I've also heard some really creative stuff, and I have no idea how much of that is from the person that's generating it or from the AI program.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that some of it's going to be collateral damage, but also some of it's going to be really good. And as somebody who can't really draw, for me to pre-visualize certain things that I wasn't able to pre-visualize before has been sort of helpful. But
Yeah.
I would never replace a human being with that AI art. I would take that AI and say, "This is what I'm gonna do. Can you figure this out for me and basically put
Right,
it in
right.
your own
I've
style."
only been using it for the raising of capital to do the film. I would not put it,
Right.
I would not necessarily want it to be used for the film. I mean, there might be a couple of ideas there because it definitely throws in ideas you don't expect, and that's helpful. But at the same time, I want to be able to sit with a person and say, all right, here are my ideas. Here, what do you think? Can we do this? Can we do that?
Yeah.
And that human element, I think, is necessary because with the AI, you can't really even interact to that extent. I
Sure,
mean, you can.
sometimes you put something into it and it like won't even listen to you. It's almost like it's got its own agenda.
Well, I think it does a lot of the time. At one point, I asked a question of AI once, and then it gave me this answer that was like complete like nonsense. It was in no way factual, and I said, "What the hell is this? This is all absolutely untrue. This is I can easily demonstrate that you're telling me absolute bullshit." And it got very upset and started apologizing over and over again.
It was apologizing to you. Oh man, we're at a point where things are going to get kind of scary in the next few years. Let's just be
I'm
honest.
ready for it. I'm really ready for it, mainly because I've read so much science fiction, and it's interesting because I've been lately listening to like old science fiction radio shows from the '50s
Hell
when
yeah.
they'd adapt stories from a lot of the big authors at that time, and a lot of the science fiction from that time is about mankind adjusting to new technology, or alien life, or rethinking reality as we know it. And I think at the time that was probably more startling than we would find it now, because in the '50s things were pretty staid and bland, and people's minds were suddenly getting opened up to much, much more than they ever really had before.
Right. And Ray Kurzweil is keeping himself alive till the singularity. What possibly could the singularity be other than us just merging with AI and becoming these like collective unconscious beings that don't really need to use most of our brain? We just access the memory and stuff like that. That's what I think the
Yeah, I mean, the
singularity.
thing is, I think it's at the moment we have no idea where the technology may go, what the problems that we don't expect at this moment may be. You
Right.
know, I'm not worried about AI taking over the world, or my robot masters making demands on me, or things like this. But the real thing to watch is, I mean, it's all going to go wherever humans are making money is where AI is going to go. So
Totally. I mean, look at the dawn of the internet. Everybody had this one idea about what the internet could be, but they couldn't have ever really predicted social media. I mean, social media is what the internet has become. And at the dawn of the internet, that's not what people were kind of seeing it become. They thought it was going to be this other thing of I don't even know what they thought. Maybe like
I
just
think
the
I think they were looking at commercializing it in entirely different ways. And the thing is, I mean, in the earliest days of the internet, we could have had social media. I mean, the technology could have, handled that. And, and there was a lot of obvious communication and stuff going on. But I remember, I mean, at the beginning of the internet, you'd go into a chat room and there are 12,000 people there. And it's like walking into a room with people screaming at each other. And I hated that.
I did too. I used to just like I actually used to do memes before they were memes. I used to do pictures of myself with like words on it and it'd be like boink, boink, stupid stuff like that. So
Right.
that was how I interacted in the chat rooms. I was never really a chat room kind of guy. You mentioned radio plays. It's funny because recently I started to listen to some of the old suspense ones, like Sorry, Wrong Number. They're
Right.
just
Yeah.
some of those are so amazing in the fact that sometimes they used to take the like say a Vincent Price movie and then boil it down into a half-hour radio play with Vincent Price still
Right. No,
voicing
they
the
did that
character.
with a lot of major movies. I mean, I've heard, stuff with Humphrey Bogart.
Mhm.
All the big stars of the 40s and 50s would frequently go, onto radio and do like whatever their constant, maybe not their current, but maybe their recent hit movie was, and do an abridged version of the movie.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff is on Spotify now. You can find it, and I was listening to some actually Basil Rathbone reading Poe. It's so good. Stuff like that is
Right.
just it's so amazing. That's also why I'm glad that the internet is what it is because we get to have this archive material that will be around forever, but it still to this day gives you like goosebumps and inspiration. The fact that this art was so beautiful back then.
Well, I mean, a lot of those radio shows are really just well produced. They're well acted.
Yeah.
Everything, the sound effects, the music, everything sort of works to give you this whole presentation. And I mean, I wish it's something that hadn't sort of passed away, more or less.
Same, because it's interesting. Some people I've seen try to do it in podcast form, and it doesn't really connect with people as big as I think it could under the right circumstances. I just wish that more people were willing to listen to a story instead of people just babble on about AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem is people don't have the patience to wait for anything. I mean, I've just, I had an aversion to social media for years, and I finally, like, when the Spookies Blu-ray came out, I sort of said, oh, maybe I should get on social media of some sort. So I got on Facebook, and I have to admit, everything drastically changed for me because suddenly I could be in touch with all these people that liked my work or wanted to talk to me, and I just had to admit, yeah, this has a great value, and obviously it does for many people. But I'm not one who I don't go on there just to bullshit or to waste time
Right.
or to, I mean, I have too much to do.
Yeah, it's like I've found myself in a click hole many times, just like, why am I not recording or writing right now? I'm just like sitting here looking at other people argue about Donald Trump. It's like, what the fuck
Right.
am I
Well,
doing?
there's no shortage of that.
Yeah, totally. Especially right today. It's been nonstop. I can't log in without seeing something about the this is the day after the Madison Square Garden rally that we're
Yeah,
recording
yeah. I
this.
mean, from what I've been reading, it was like a Hitler 2.0
That's
for
what
real.
people were saying, and they're going after this comedian who made these really crazy jokes. And
Right.
I if I were Trump's people, I would have been like, I would have vetted that a little bit better.
I remember as a kid in high school seeing some documentary with footage from the rally that they did in the 30s, the fascist rally they did in the 30s, and I remember as a kid thinking, "Oh my God, how could this happen in America?"
Yeah. Well, hey, we're living in crazy times, and you never know what's going to happen next week. But I actually,
I read a lot of science fiction, so I'm not too surprised by
yeah,
very
we
much.
won't be surprised. So before we had a quick phone call before, and you said something interesting at the tail end of it, and I'd like to follow that thread because I just watched a movie called Black Sunday, not the one by Mario Bava with Barbara Steele, the one from the '70s with Bruce Dern and Robert Shaw, directed by Mr. John Frankenheimer. Now, you
Yes.
said that you interacted and had a conversation with John
I
Frankenheimer.
went to an advanced screening, and Frankenheimer was there, and I remember, and it was part of a class that I was actually in at the time,
Wow.
and and the whole class sat in the conference room talking to John Frankenheimer, and I think I impressed him because I asked him about a film of his that's not very well known called Impossible Object,
Okay.
right?
I don't know that one, so now I'm gonna watch it.
It was like a real. It barely got released at all. And I had read about it in a magazine like a couple of years earlier, and I think he was delighted to be able to talk about it because no one ever brings it up.
That's amazing. I mean, there's, I don't want to spoil it in case anybody wants to watch it, but there is a specific surprise explosion in that movie that is so well done that me and my girlfriend Liz Shack, our producer, we were watching it and we both jumped up. We were like, "Oh my God!" And then we rewound it 5 times to see how they had pulled off the trick. And it's so brilliant the way that they pulled off the trick. And
Mhm.
honestly, anybody who hasn't seen this movie, it's just the only problem I had with it is it is a little long. It's like over
Yeah,
two and a half hours, but worth it. Totally worth it. And apparently it got buried because it came out the same year as Star Wars, much like
also,
Sorcerer.
the other bizarre thing is there is a movie called 2 Minute Warning that the essential premise of Black Sunday is it's about a blimp that's used to they want to use a blimp to have a terrorist incident take place at a major sports stadium, right?
Oh,
A
so is that
football,
before?
pardon?
2 minute warning was before?
2 Minute Warning came out like within I forget exactly, but it was within like a month or two of the other film. So
Oh my
they were
God.
virtually and in those days films used to stick around in theaters generally. So these two movies with I mean they went in different directions, but two very similar premises.
Well, it's that Dante's Peak and Volcano syndrome where
Similar
they
to that. Yeah, yeah.
or Deep Impact and Armageddon. You wonder who stole the idea from who, or it's just sometimes they simultaneous
Well, one of the
creation.
things, I mean, I don't think it works exactly the same way anymore, but there was a time in Hollywood where, if there was a buzz about one studio making a certain script or whatever, and keep in mind, scripts would float from one studio to the next before one of them picked it up. So there was an awareness generally of anything that seemed like it might be hot potentially. And they used to just, I mean, Roger Corman's a perfect example.
Sure.
He'd hear about some major studio production. All right, well, in our version that we're starting tomorrow.
I love that so much. I mean, the Asylum has kind of kept that torch going where you get Transformers coming out, so they'll do Transmorphers.
Right. I get bored with that after a while, though. I feel like it's almost done by rote. It's not really they're not really thinking very much. It's like, oh, they have this, now we'll have this. They have this. Well, I mean, Corman always struck me as doing stuff in a creative, like he'd come up with some off the wall way of doing it, or do something that would not just be a blatant soulless ripoff.
Yeah, so there's thousands of Deliverance redos, right? Probably, I mean, thousands is an exaggeration, but there's so many. But you get to a movie like Southern Comfort by Walter Hill, and that is like Deliverance but different, and it does it in a different way
Right.
that's just so interesting and good, where sometimes the mimicry or the homage works because they
Well,
did
usually, I
care.
mean, I judge things in terms of if you're going to do a rip-off movie. I mean, actually, I feel this goes for almost any movie. If you're doing a certain thing in a certain genre and it's a somewhat familiar story or premise, you either have to make it the best version of that premise that you can possibly conceive of, or you just have to take it in some radically different direction that the audience will not expect.
So when you did Spookies, were there any inspirations you were drawing from, or Twisted Souls was the original title
Well,
that?
I mean, we were drawing from myself and my two partners, Tom Doran, Brendan Faulkner, who were the co-directors. We all had very similar interests in terms of mostly based on the movies that we grew up with and the movies we saw as kids. Plus, we were just attracted to the more imaginative, weird genres of horror and science fiction and fantasy. And I think that it was a time when that kids nowadays don't realize that when some of us were younger, that you pretty much had nothing but older movies to watch for the most part. So you had to just be content with that, and you either got into it or you didn't. I just think we were attracted to the same things, to these genres. Those guys, one of the things those guys got me into that I hadn't that had any familiarity was like old movie serials, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which apparently were playing before I got to the age where I might have even been interested. They were playing on TV all the time, and then they stopped playing them.
Radar Men from the Moon.
All that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good one actually. So did you classify yourself, or would you classify yourself as a monster kid when you were younger?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's that. I think when you're a certain age, I think kids just naturally gravitate towards that for many reasons. I mean, there's a certain fantasy element, etc. But I think it's different than, there's a difference between a monster movie and say the Banana Splits or something, where you're sort of, made to feel comfortable by these fake characters, these people in costumes. And monsters, I think there's a similar thing, but I mean, I think it's been said before, kids identify with monsters because they're still sort of adjusting to feeling like to developing whoever they are in the world. And I'd say earliest movie memories are things usually that I would come in the middle of the movie.
Oh yeah, and you'd
And
have to sort of paint your own idea of what the
I
story.
woke up that morning at 9 a.m. and on TV on like Channel 5 or something in New York is the Island of Lost Souls with Charles Lawton, right? And it's the climax of the movie, and there are all these freakish beast men running around, and I didn't know what I was seeing, but I was blown away by it. And I used to watch. I saw on weekdays at 4:30, ABC television in New York would have the 4:30 movie, which would be it would be whatever it is. It was fit into a 90-minute time slot, which means it was frequently cut down. And that's where I saw like all the American International black and white movies and so many other not even 40s. It was mostly 50s and 60s, I think. But I really became very familiar with all that stuff, and then again, Godzilla. I mean, first time I saw the original King Kong, it was like life-changing.
Oh yeah, that movie still holds up, and it's gonna.
I feel the same way. And to tell the truth, I met somebody a while back that claimed they were a big movie fan and everything, and I brought that film up, and they're going, "Oh, I could never watch that. It's too primitive." It's like it's too primitive.
Primitive, like
it's actually for its time, it's exceptionally well made, and it still seems exceptionally well made to me.
Yeah, I just watched a movie, The Black Scorpion. You ever see that movie?
Yeah. Also by Willis O'Brien, who did Kong.
Well, that's the thing is, like, even after all those years, he was still pushing that art form forward. And
right.
Like, people give that movie a little grief because the close-up looks a little goofy or whatever.
I think those were added later my guess is those were added later by the producers.
Right.
And they do not have the same quality as the animated Scorpion.
But when it's in a long shot of it, throwing tanks around and stuff, that's some amazing shit.
No, it's a very threatening monster for the most part. I think, the problem with it, at that time, O'Brien it's not like he was getting regular work. He had to practically, worm his way in to get films made at that point. And a few years later, Harryhausen started to specialize in that stuff. And I think that's when Hollywood producers decided, oh, this technique is worth using more often.
Right. So late to the game. I mean, they could have been making those movies all along. Somebody that
the audience in their minds was not there.
Well, I mean, it's somebody that recently I've been getting into a lot is Jack Arnold.
Yeah.
Some of his stuff, I mean, The Incredible Shrinking Man, I've watched now 5 times this year because of the way that not just the story, but the way that it is existential horror at the end. Not to spoil anything, but it is not a happy ending. That is.
It's sort of a happy ending because he comes to terms with what he knows is facing him.
But it's cosmic horror. It's like where to now? I mean, what is he going to witness as he gets smaller and smaller infinitely? It's like
right. And I had a real connection to that movie at the time when I first saw it. I wound up reading the book, which is by Richard Matheson, who wrote so much great television and film and dozens of short stories. One of the best sci-fi and horror short stories writers.
Absolutely.
And I really I felt close to that movie in a lot of ways. I have a one sheet for it. Oh, get this! I have a one sheet poster for it. Right? I bought it from some mail order service in about maybe 1980 or something. Right? The price was $1.50.
Whoa. How much is that worth now? Jeez.
I haven't even looked recently. I also bought a poster, a one sheet for The Thing from Another World, $2.
That's so cool. So what about back in the day, did you go and see any 3D movies when they were first run?
I never saw any 3D movie in a theater. I mean, I think the first movie I saw in a theater that was 3D was Warhol's Frankenstein.
Which is that's an interesting one to see in
It,
3D.
it is it actually, and I was very impressed. There's one moment in that where these bats fly out and they fly like over and around your head, and that really hit me. That I felt, and I've always liked the idea of 3D. I find that too often it doesn't quite carry through on its potential.
Yeah, sometimes they don't, but the not too long ago I went to what's the hell is Film Forum in New York City, and they had like a 3D month. My friend Kenny Filmer is a big 3D buff, and usually I'm like, oh, let's do a horror or science fiction one, but we went and we saw this movie called Buona Devil.
Yeah, I worked at United Artists Classics, their old film division back in the '80s for a while, and I had the ability to go to their film library, a lot of which was 16 millimeter rentals, and ask for any film that was in the library. And I had a 16 millimeter projector. I was a 16 millimeter collector starting like at the age of 13 or something, and so I see, oh, they've got Buona Devil. And so I say, send me Buona Devil, because there's no other way I'm going to see it. And it's not very good.
It's not good, but in the 3D, it really does add a dimension, obviously, to it. But some of the photography of the lions and all this sort of stuff, it does become captivating in a way. And you
Yeah,
start to
I saw the 2D version, so
right. Well, when in the 3D, I started to rewrite the movie in my head and say, all right, if they had just added this, maybe it would have been a little better, sharper, this and that. But the 3D is so beautifully done that you sort of get lost in it finally by the third act. And another one that we saw that run was It Came from Outer Space,
right.
that Jack
Yeah.
Arnold movie. And that one's great because they do the POV of the alien pushing in and all that
Yeah,
sort
there's
of
a lot
stuff.
more thought put into utilizing the process.
Yeah.
I think it's weird because that process was not like new in the 50s. I mean, they started doing 3D movies back in the 20s or possibly earlier. And every now and then, like in the 30s, 40s, 50s, a short would come out and be, oh, and it's in 3D. And they would just use it to highlight and hype this short. But nobody ever thought about doing a feature film.
Wow. Well, I love it, and I hope that it's the 3D Film Archive. They keep putting this great stuff out. I'm gonna keep checking it out in the theaters when I can. One of my Golden Goose ones is Dial M for Murder. I still have never seen that movie in 2D, and I'm waiting for the 3D screening to come along.
Really?
Yeah,
I've seen it. I've seen it in 2D a few times.
I'm waiting. I've seen so many other Hitchcock movies, and I just want to see what he done, experience it in the 3D.
Right.
Recently, are there any movies that you feel that are super underrated that you would recommend that people maybe revisit? Like, for instance, I just watched Black Sunday. I think that that's something that people can rediscover in this day and age. Anything that you think that over time has sort of lost its luster?
Dozens of things. I mean, nothing immediately comes to mind as the number one or two choice. And I frequently, I sometimes find myself seeing a movie like many years later, and finally I'm like either old enough or smart enough or something to appreciate it in a way that was just not possible. Like, have you ever seen the film Performance with Mick Jagger?
Yes.
Okay,
That's an
it's kind of
interesting film.
It's like very experimental. And for a while, I ran several repertory theaters, but I was managing a theater in New Rochelle in Westchester County, and we ran Performance, and I'd never seen it before, and I saw it, and I realized, all right, this is not an easy film to comprehend. More than half the audience walked out while the film was on.
Really?
Yeah. And I sort of had mixed, indeterminate feelings about it, and I saw it many years later, and I suddenly got it somehow, and I thought, oh well, this is actually a pretty bold experiment here.
Absolutely. I found out about that movie because there used to be this site called Disinformation, disinfo.com, and it was like the guy who wrote the article about it was talking about all the occult symbolism and things in that movie. So that made me want to seek it out to see what it was all about. I didn't really get that part of it, but I just thought it was so interesting that it led me to more Nicholas Roeg's work. Is that how you say his name, Nicholas Roeg?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
So
And he, for the most part, was always doing something that he was doing something very personal with the way he was trying to tell the story.
yeah, I the one that I have. Let me see. I'm looking on Letterbox right now. The one that I have not seen by him is Walkabout, that people say is amazing.
Oh, it's very good. It's probably one of his more accessible films.
Really? Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, look, Don't Look Now and The Man Who Fell to Earth. Jeez. Oh, he did The Witches.
Yeah, that's one of his. That's another one of his strangely more commercial movies.
That movie's amazing. Like the Roald Dahl Witches from that from 1990. It says that's a great film for kids. I mean, it's scary as hell, but it's still like really well done. I didn't know he did that. That's so cool. Um,
Yeah, it was odd because he became known for doing sort of avant-garde, totally out of the mainstream types of films that were generally then respected as art films. And as a director for a film like that, I don't know who gave him the job, but it took some guts at the time.
Absolutely. So when you ran these theaters, how would you program? Would you do like theme months, or what was your way to program?
I worked for RKO theaters that had several repertory, revival houses in different parts of the Northeast, and they had like, this is one of my big criticisms of all the revival and the theaters that there were in New York City. There were at various times anywhere from like 3 to 10 theaters that specialized in older or something that was not new and mainstream. And I was given like quite a bit of freedom in programming, meaning that they had certain films they knew always drew an audience, and they would always want to program them at regular intervals, to tell the truth. And I could, at the same time, I could go to them and say, all right, how about this? And they would look and see if there was a print somewhere, and if there was, we could get a print. It's like, I mean, like a film that I got, that I we showed 2001, and they needed something else for a double bill, and I had them get the film by Robert Fust, The Last Days of Man on Earth. Do you know the film I'm talking
No,
about?
so this one I don't know, and I'm gonna add that to my.
70s sci-fi movie based on a book by Michael Moorcock, and it's not a great film, but it's got elements to it that you just didn't see in most sci-fi around that time, and I liked it. It had just something to it, and so I had already seen it on 42nd Street, and I just said, "All right, can you get this film and let's play it." And I had that much ability, at least, so I got to see a number of films that I wanted to see simply by programming them.
That's amazing. So, when you were doing this sort of stuff, like, programming these things, how wild were the audiences? Because I have this picture in my head that back in the day, the audiences were even more wild than they are today. Like, I know
No,
that they're
I keep in mind it was a repertory theater.
okay.
So it's not like going for this week's, big release or something. It's a different sector of the audience.
Sure.
They were attempting to cater mostly towards younger people, a lot of whom had never seen certain films, and they assumed that was a big part of their audience. I mean, when I started managing the theater, they were about to start a festival of rock and roll and concert movies.
Oh,
So we ran like every concert movie that was available at the time. And a lot of them were just goddamn awful, to tell the truth, just really poorly made. But they had performances of artists that people really wanted to see.
what about
So
smoking in the theater, where people just lighting cigs and going?
smoking was still permitted at that time, in the smoking. Uh, but the real factor for me was in terms of the audience. Now, keep in mind, I was also, during this time, I would also spend, like my time off doing things like going into New York City to go to 42nd Street and catch, double bills. Sometimes on a weekend, I'd catch like 3 double bills in a row because they were there. The admissions were absurdly low. And I always just looked at the audiences as part of the entertainment. I never felt intimidated or weird about that. But at my theater, the audience was, keep in mind, teenagers, etc. So you get a certain amount of rowdiness and whatever.
Sure.
But one of the things that we did is we were running the Rocky Horror Picture Show every weekend. So
Mm.
those audiences did get a little bit insane, including one night where I had to ask a motorcycle gang to stop doing, what motorcycle gangs might do in any social situation. And I came to them, and the guy, and the leader of the gang is sitting there, and he had a broken leg, so he's got his leg propped up on the seat in front of him. And I say, "Look, could you please just not, you can't, you can throw popcorn, you can throw this, but you can't, you can't start throwing objects that might hurt somebody, things like that." And he threw a fistful of popcorn into my face. And I went and I got the security guard, right? And the whole gang gets pulled out of the theater, right? And they're screaming and going berserk. And they're threatening me now personally, right? So he just called the cops. The police came, took them away. And I'm amazed nothing else further came of it. But that's probably the worst actual incident. I mean, the regular Rocky Horror crowd was insane, but it wasn't destructive for the most part.
Wow, see, that's what I'm talking about. So, I've experienced some well-placed quips or people that just won't shut up and this, that, but you had to encounter a biker gang. That's amazing.
Well, I was always, but I was always, at the same time, I was the guy in the theater where if somebody started talking and it was a good movie, I would like just say, all right, you're either going to watch the movie or you're going to go out in the lobby and talk. There are only two choices.
Yeah.
And I frequently would go to the management and say, all right, you've got to do something about these people.
Yeah.
Whereas for the most part, and I don't go to the movies often enough now to know what the ratio is of people that still do this. And because for the most part, I get the impression that audiences just put up with it.
The last three movies that we went to, me and Liz Shack, Liz has, and she does. I try to grin and bear it, but Liz will be like, "Excuse me, can you please be quiet?" And usually people just shut up. There was one that was bad that we went to see. You mentioned 2001. We went to see 2001 in 70 millimeter at the Museum of Moving Image, and you're not
Right.
supposed to bring food or drink in, but this couple next to us was chomping on potato chips. I mean, it was louder than the goddamn soundtrack. And it's during like the Dawn of Man where it's just like so finally I was like, you're louder than the sound effects. Can you guys stop chomping? It's like they stopped. But
Well,
yeah,
I'm extremely guilty of doing that. And when I told you about my days at 42nd Street, I would come in with like a small box of food to last me through the day, and I'd have a couple of meals while I was watching movies.
yeah. Oh man. Well, we only have a few minutes left. I just want to kind of wrap it up with you, but it's been so great talking to you. Hopefully you come back and we'll keep shooting the shit about movies because
And we talked about a lot of stuff I never expected us to even cover, so that's nice.
Yeah, I love talking to you because you obviously love movies, and when I get involved
I
with
do. I mean, this is one thing I'll say before we break it up here. But I mean, my partner Tom Durant, who I continued to work with for years after Spookies, one day out of the blue, he says, "Frank, you love movies more than anybody I've ever met." And I thought I was taken aback, and I was like, "Wow, really?" And he just said, "Yeah." He said, "You know more. You're more enthusiastic." And I said, "Wow, that's the greatest compliment you've ever given me."
and it shines through. I mean, just to talk to you about these older films like Performance. I mean, hopefully some of our audience could go out and check out Performance. That's what I mean. Like when I said.
One of the things I don't understand, and this is going back to when I first became excited about movies, is so many people just dismiss movies past a certain age. It's like a lot of people, the only thing they're interested in is movies made more or less since they were born,
Right.
because those are the ones they had their earliest memories of. And I think you're missing out unbelievably. I mean, I just I can't imagine not. I love the whole history of cinema.
Same. I mean, I was for many years anti-silent films just because I saw them in college, and the ones that they showed me I wasn't really thrilled about. But then Liz Shack,
college film courses are a good method to turn people off of movies.
totally true. But then Liz Shack showed me The Unknown with Lon Chaney, and that's one of the greatest goddamn fucked up movies I ever saw. So
No, I mean, especially towards the late silent era, just before sound took over, some of the best films ever made were put out at that time. They really started to learn how to use the language of cinema, and I love films from that period.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, how can we get in touch with you? How can we support you? Let us know. What do you got?
I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, which I keep forgetting. Uh, and I'm right now. I'm at the beginning of our trip, which hopefully won't be too long, to get the financing we need to make the Spookies sequel, which we barely spoke about. Uh, but it's
We'll
okay.
have you come back on and to promote the
No,
hell out of it.
the real thing is, I this is all facilitated by the fact that the Spookies Blu-ray, which was the first video release it had in this country in like 4 decades or something, that it did it did well. It made the film suddenly a known commodity. I mean, I just to finish this, you guys at the last drive-in, I owe you all such a big debt of thanks just for getting the film on there. Your song, the Spookies rap, people bring it up to me like constantly. People seem to get a real kick out of it when you first did it. And I mean, I all the time. I mean, I always get people, Spookies. It's a very confusing movie.
Well, I apologize because the more that I watched it, actually, it's not that confusing, to be honest. It was more when they were describing, because I had seen Spookies like when I was a kid, and
Right.
then when I watched it this time, it was more like, all right, just can you make this song about this, that, the other thing? And when I was watching it, I was taking notes, and it just like kind of rhymed, and then I went with that motif.
Well, I think
Uh,
it is very confusing.
all right, I didn't want to insult you.
No, I mean the worst thing that happened after it got footage added to it, recut, etc., is simply that I think it's frustrating in a way only certain movies are, where a story starts and you start watching and you assume, all right, this is the story and this is what I'm going to be following. Suddenly there's a new scene, there's new characters, there's a new plot line, and you can't figure out what the hell one has to do with the other. And the film pretty much proceeds that way. I mean, eventually there are connections made,
Right.
but I think for me, just I've seen it endless times at this point, and I find it difficult to watch just because the story doesn't. It takes away the possibility of even being satisfied with certain elements of the story because it doesn't stick with one bit or another.
Right, because the princess, like the princess with the guy with the Ouija board and the whole thing, like you don't know how that connects to the people
Well,
partying.
eventually, you sort of get an idea, but I
Yeah.
mean, to give you an idea how clear it is I still haven't been able to determine whether Creon, the sorcerer, is in the basement or the attic. I presume he must be. He's got to be in one or the other.
Oh, so that's interesting that you, as the man who made this movie, still don't know if he's downstairs or upstairs.
Well, I don't. Plus, I mean, and I've talked about this endlessly in many podcasts at this point, but the what was done to it is so unnecessary and was so haphazard, and primarily done so Eugenie Joseph, who was formerly known as porn star Erica Havens, could get a directing credit.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah, that's really what it came down to.
Oh, that sounds like a tale as old as time.
I mean, otherwise, and the most sinful thing she did really is all the good scenes, the best scenes, the monster scenes are all cut short thanks to her.
Mm.
I mean, I don't get it. It's like taking all the cum shots out of a porn movie.
Which doesn't make sense for a porn star to do.
Well, it's like ultimately it's either hardcore porn or it's not. But with Spookies, it was like, yeah, it's this thing, and now, but we're gonna take stuff away from it that we would normally use to sell the movie.
Well, we got a couple minutes. What about Spookies 2? So is this like your vision for what you wanted for the original?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, my partner for many years, Tom Doran, after vowing like irately that he would never ever have anything to do with a Spooky sequel, he just said, "Oh, by the way, I wrote an outline for a Spooky sequel," and I was like stunned, and I was like, "Well, I have to read it, of course." And it was great. It was like hilarious, and it was like perfect because it had as little as possible to do with Spookies, but the ways that it did were in a sort of mocking way. And I've just taken that and at that time we actually were trying to make. We figured, all right, we've got 1,000 projects we've tried to get money to do. The thing we probably, unfortunately, stand the best chance of getting money is if we said we want to make a sequel to Spookies. This was long before there was a Blu-ray or before most horror fans had ever even seen the film. But we figured because it's a film, it's been made. So we tried at one point. We tried to get the rights to Spookies that Vinegar Syndrome wound up purchasing, and now owns all rights of all sorts. So, and we traced it around the world. It was owned by various companies at different times. Vestron Video apparently released it in Europe and owned the film completely for a number of years, like in the late 90s. But we eventually traced it back to our backer, who would not give us rights to anything. You know, I mean, we are the reason that the film became what it was, meaning we made the original film, but then our leaving sort of forced him to make a desperation move.
Oh man. Well, I'm gonna watch Spookies 2 the day it comes out. So, I know that there's a lot of people.
Man, if Spookies 2 comes out, that's true because you will be invited to the premiere.
Oh, yes.
I mean, presuming we have a premiere. I mean, I keep saying I say stuff like that, but I never know. Distributors are always I don't know what to say that's not too insulting, but they usually create problems of some sort.
Sure, and you never know. But hopefully, I mean, look, Terrifier 3 had this insane, independent, unrated film extravaganza this Halloween season. You never know. Spookies 2 might take the world by storm.
I haven't seen Terrifier 3 yet, but I feel it's an important film because it suddenly it threw the balance way off of how things work in the movie business these days. There was a time where a film like Terrifier 3, a fairly low budget horror film would, new ones would open every week. They were all over the place all the time. Although I heard Terrifier 3 was a $5 million budget, which is like astounding considering how they started out. But it's giving credibility to filmmakers like Damien Leone, like anybody who's had a little bit of attention given to them suddenly because they made a relatively cheap film and it made some headway into the mainstream, and that's the real difference.
And say what you will about the series, I mean, that makes it, like you said, an important film because when it goes up against something that costs probably $150 million to make the Joker or whatever the hell, and these guys are doing it for a fraction of the cost, and that's important for people like you and me who want to make independent film, whether or not you like the movies. It doesn't matter. That's important.
But what it means is distributors and theaters will not have the reservations they might have had about taking a chance on something like that.
Right, and let's have another renaissance like we had in the 90s where independent film was just as important or interesting as these big Hollywood tentpole films.
It's interesting because that whole aspect of movie going has almost disappeared in terms of like people just doing films, whether they were art films or just lower budgeted, versions of Hollywood movies. There was an independent film movie where people got to do things with a lot more of a personal touch that I think has vanished from the major studio movies.
Yes, absolutely. And look, I dig some of the superhero stuff like Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, I dig a lot of stuff, but at the same time, I feel the problem is that Hollywood is more conservative now than ever. Mm-hmm. What I tell people is if they could, all the studios would get together once a year and make one movie, which is a remake of the movie that they made last year that was the big hit, which was a remake of the movie they made before that, which is endlessly making the same movie over and over again because they think that's the safest thing to do.
That's actually, I wish that they would do that one year where they all get one fucking movie and nothing else. That would be the biggest blockbuster of all time, whether or not it's good.
But based on a lot of factors, I think it would be terribly written or something. I mean, there would be something that simply did not work. And I think it just comes down to if your motivation is simply money, It's all right to have money as a motivation, but when your motivation is almost entirely money, you're not going to get the best results
No,
in the end.
no.
And this is one of the reasons I have a real problem with so many like horror sequels. I feel like a lot of them, they're just not in any way ambitious. They're just like, all right, well, we'll do exactly what we did the last time, again and again and again, until the audience gets tired of it. Like I felt like with the last Halloween films, I felt they had a real opportunity to do something that would just rise above all these like half-baked sequels that had been happening over the decades. And I think they tried to on some level, but I just don't think. I mean, I feel to do something like that, you have to just decide. All right, let's throw away like 90% of what we've done and find an entirely new way to go. And some people will reject that, but my feeling is if you do that and your film is still entertaining and the audience can get into it, it doesn't matter if you change things radically; they'll forgive you. And I'm hoping that's the case with Spookies too.
Me too. And I'm a fan, and honestly, talking to you about movies is a great experience. So I appreciate you coming on to Yuki and John's podcast buffet because
Yeah, thank you for having me. Say hello to Yuki for me when you speak to him.
I will. He's in Japan and he's having a good time. So thank you for being the co-host of this podcast buffet episode.
Yeah, I'm having a great time, and I hope to have a good time again.
All right, Frank, I appreciate you so much, and we'll talk to you very soon, and I'll put all the links down below, and I'll let you know when this is out.
All right, fantastic, John. Good talking to you, and I'll see you again soon.
You know, after all that, I still don't think I understand the plot of Spookies. You know what we need? We need one of those custom rap songs like at the end of Maniac Cop 2 last week, but I don't know where we... John!
Yo!
We got a guy named Duke and a puppet named Mook. Happy birthday, Billy, here's a bunch of balloons. You're gonna be buried alive very soon by a cat boy in a gold vest, it's confusing. Who is this older guy in a gray suit? He's hanging out with teens, it's inexplicable. And who's this other guy up in the attic? Talking to a princess, starting some static. He seems to like chess, does he own the mansion? But we're not offered any plot expansion. Here comes the Ouija board. Yuki, what's a spooky?
I have no idea what's going on in this movie.
Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie.
So is it the Ouija board or the guy in the attic who wakes up the Spookies?
I don't know.
Yo, I'm a spooky and I'm here to say I'm really spooky in a major way. You're talking trash about the plot, is that all you got? The street trash director was a steady cam op. The only thing we need are spooky thrills, so sit back, relax, and take a chill pill. Or drown out your sorrows in alcohol while we lay out this very super spooky roll call.
Spider spooky, child spooky, Grim Reaper spooky, all these spookies. Fuck spookies, keep fuck spooky, Yuki spooky.
I'm not the spooky.
Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie. Hey, we watch Spookies, it's very confusing movie.
Oh, my Lanta. My Lanta. That was like a medicine, and I remember back in school, somebody would say that all the time as a joke. Instead of saying, my Lord, they would say, my Lanta. So that was the Spookies rap, which was from the last Drive-In Spookies episode, and that's what connects me to our guest today, Mr. Frank Farel. I really appreciate him coming on because I'm a fan of Spookies. I think it's great. The practical effects are insane. The Spider Lady, all of the farting Spookies are amazing. And it really is a good movie to watch when you're really stoned like I am right now, to be honest. That's a marijuana movie if I ever saw one. And yeah, look out for Spookies 2. That's coming. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully they up the ante and have more monsters and more mayhem, which they will. Absolutely, they will. So I'm going to leave you with another special treat here. I pulled a clip also from the archives of the last drive-in, and I think this was the first major appearance of Yuki on the show. It's an interview, a quick interview with him and Joe Bob, where Yuki explains how he worked with Sonny Chiba. This is from the Wolf Guy episode, which isn't any longer on Shudder for the moment. I guess the rights lapse, but they'll probably get that back at some point. But for now, we'll include it here. You can hear a quick synopsis of how Yuki worked with Sonny Chiba. And don't worry, next week Yuki's back, ladies and gentlemen. So we really appreciate all of our patrons, all of our listeners. This is such an adventure to do, and we're in the 80s now, as 80-something episodes, and it's a testament to that we didn't stop, that we're having a great time doing it, because all of you love to hang out and ask us questions, and so many suggestions that we're going to get to. And me and Yuki are definitely going to keep doing this until, I don't know, we're at least going to break 100 for sure, pretty soon. And then, who knows, sky's the limit with 200, 300, 400 of these buffet episodes, because there's a lot of topics to cover. I want to do sex education with Yuki. I want to actually show him the PBS special, The Miracle of Life, and just film him watching that. I think that would be pretty spectacular. So anyway, thank you again. Here's Yuki and Joe Bob discussing Yuki working with Sonny Chiba.
This was made by the B-movie division of Toei Studios, one of the big four. There was Toho, that's the Japanese studio everybody's heard of because they made Godzilla, and Kadokawa. And this movie was made by Toei, which was the top studio in Yakuza and martial arts. And then, what was the fourth Japanese studio? There's four of them. Yuki, come on out here. What was the our set designer, art director is Japanese. So
Shochiku, that was the Shochiku.
Shochiku. Yuki owns more bolo ties than I do. The Tokyo Cowboy. Shochiku Studios was known for kabuki and anime. Did you ever work with Sonny Chiba?
Yes, I did. It wasn't a movie, but I did a commercial with him twice.
You did a commercial with Sonny Chiba. For what product?
The first one was a rice cooker.
Rice cooker?
Yeah.
What did he do? Did he kung fu the rice cooker?
No, he was in the kitchen and just cooked the food.
Okay. What was the second one?
Second one was around Kill Bill time, so the company casted both Tarantino and Sonny Chiba. And
you made a commercial with Tarantino and Sonny Chiba?
Yes.
Doing what?
I was an art coordinator.
Oh, you were art coordinator. But I mean, what was the product? What were they
the cell phone. The digital cell phone commercial, yeah.
And what did they do?
Tarantino, his character is like a talking guy, constantly talking, so obnoxious. And then Sonny Chiba's character is a detective, so chasing him to arrest him. So
okay. So it's an action. It's an action commercial.
Yes.
So you've worked with the great Sonny Chiba. That's great.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Yuki. We learned something tonight.
Thank you.
So anyway, my point is, where are we? All right. My point is,
Yuki and John's Patriot of Earth.